You know, The Wall is one of my favorite albums of all time. It tells the story of a man who progressively isolates himself from the rest of the world, slowly descending into madness as he does so. Over the course of the album, he turns every traumatic experience he goes through into a brig, with which he builds a wall to seclude himself from a world that he doesn't understand, and which is in turn incapable of understanding him. The absent father who went away to fight a war at the behest of the High Command, the overprotective mother, the castrating school system that tried to flay him into shape, the cheating wife, all in all, these were all just bricks in the wall for the protagonist of the album. And I find this story quite relatable, not because I'm some moon-addled lunatic who seeks to isolate himself from the rest of the world, yet, but because I can see why someone would want to build a wall around him to completely disappear from a world that feels like a party that he didn't get invited to, a world where there's only pain and suffering, like going to your ex-girlfriend's Facebook page to find out that she now has an OnlyFans account. Well, to me, this world is the AAA game market. Wise men, far wiser than myself, have warned me against going there, but against my better judgment, once or twice a year I drop by to see if there's anything good, and every time I do, I come back with a new lesson in never again, a new traumatic experience, a new brick in the wall. And I am here to talk to you guys about the latest lesson in never again, the latest traumatic experience, the latest brick in the wall. I'm talking about Marvel Midnight Suns. A game that made me reflect upon the big questions of humanity, like, what the fuck? If you go to the game's page on Steam, you'll see that it has very positive reviews. Not mixed, not mostly positive, very positive.
What?
This game came out in the year 2022, and Angry Joe had it as one of his top 10 games of the year.
What?
But he likes his AAA titles, and he has a high degree of tolerance for shit, Marvel shit included, so that's not much of a surprise. But even reviewers who greatly appreciate what the indie market has to offer had this title as one of their top picks of the year.
What?
If I know you guys, I know that a good chunk of you are going to need one question answered. What the fuck is Marvel Midnight Suns? Because I know that some of you old farts are still on your 100th playthrough of your favorite Infinity Engine game or one of the 2 OG Fallouts. And you know what? Good on you guys. You truly are better off playing any of those games for the 100th time than Marvel Midnight Suns for the first one. Because the good question here is not, what is Marvel Midnight Suns, but why is Marvel Midnight Suns? And to that question, I'm afraid I don't have an answer. So I guess we'll have to go with what is Marvel Midnight Suns. Well, if you trim the fat, and believe me, this game has more fat than your average beauty pageant these days, you get a game that sits somewhere in between cart battler a la Slay the Spire and turn-based tactical game along the lines of Xcom Enemy Unknown. And if I were being completely disingenuous, and not just partially so as I am being now, I would say something like, listen, I'm a huge cart battler enthusiast, I'm a big fan of XCOM's brand of combat, and I used to love everything Marvel, especially Doctor Strange and the Ghost Rider, so in theory, this game is supposed to be 100% for someone like me. And I didn't like it, not one bit. In fact, I detested it. So, it's a complete and total bust, however you look at it. But like I said, that would be tremendously intellectually dishonest of me. I am perfectly aware of the current state of Marvel. I know that it hasn't been for me for almost a decade now. I know that if a game was published by 2K, features top-tier production values, was aggressively marketed all across the board, and was originally going for $60 when it first came out, I can't expect it to have hardcore card battler mechanics that would appeal to a seasoned card battler freak, or challenging turn-based encounters that only an XCOM savant would be able to figure out. This game is for people who pick the next game they are going to play almost exclusively from the AAA shelf, and may play a first-person shooter just as soon as a third-person action game. It's for people who, when they hear someone complain about Baldur's Gate 3 being too easy, even on the, at the time, hardest difficulty level, say something like, I'm calling bullshit on anyone who says Baldur's Gate 3 is easy, because in their minds, Mass Effect 2 and The Witcher 3 are hardcore RPGs that stick to the purest conception of the genre. Those two games are awesome, by the way, don't read me wrong. What I mean is that this game was made for casuals, and it had to be. because making a AAA title as big as this one and ticking the boxes of everything the hardcore cart battler or tactical turn-based game enjoyers want would be like deciding that you want to start your own chain of Mexican food restaurants and then going hard in the paint with 100% traditional dishes from the depths of Monterrey and Zacatecas, dripping with the hottest chili imaginable and completely renouncing any form of Tex-Mex, even if you know it's way more palatable to the normie food enjoyer than authentic Mexican cuisine. And that's why I took so long to get this game. I was interested in the whole Marvel-themed Slay the Spire meets Xcom deal, but I wanted to wait until the price went down to, something more according to the game's real value. That doesn't mean it's bad, it's just not for me. But there are no objective reviews of video games, just reviewers whose criteria you happen to coincide with the most. And since I can't speak on behalf of those who might have enjoyed this game, since I can only call things as I see them, I'm going to come out and say from the bottom of my heart that I think this game is shit.
Korasho Boomer.
Boomer?
It's slang for ancient outdated one who caused all of our problems.
In my opinion. It reminds me of the song Wrong by Depeche Mode. Remember how everything was wrong in that song? Took the wrong road that led to the wrong tendencies and reached the wrong ends by the wrong means because it was the wrong plan in the wrong hands? Well, that's Marvel Midnight Suns for you. For me, it's the wrong gameplay mix approached in the wrong way. It was the wrong use for the wrong IP license, the wrong depiction of the wrong characters, and more importantly, making it a story-driven game was the wrong decision. The shit that is Marvel Midnight Suns is greater than the sum of its turds, so let's address each turd individually, shall we? First turd, the deck building. I would be lying if I told you that the game doesn't nail what it's going for in the deck building department. My problem is with what they were going for in the deck building department. But let's get the good stuff out of the way. In Marvel Midnight Suns, you control heroes, and each hero has his or her own unique deck. The game has missions for you to complete, some of them are relevant to the story, and some of them are non-mandatory. For each mission, you are asked to choose 3 heroes. You start the game with 7 heroes, 8 if you count your main character, and by the end of the game you have a roster of 12. And the chaps at Firaxis really knew what they were doing, I'm not gonna lie. Each hero has a clearly defined array of roles that he or she is particularly good at. Captain America, for example, is quite obviously meant to be the tank of the lot, so most of his cards serve to generate block or to taunt enemies. With Nico Minoru, for example, you can go for several different builds, and she has a wide array of cards to support each of them. You can play her as an insane damage specialist, if a little bit chaotic, or you can build her to be the party's healer, if you include in your deck the various healing and resistance spells that she has at her disposal. There are also some pretty sweet synergies with almost every combination of heroes. For example, you can use Captain America's shield bounce to taunt every enemy in the AoE, and then you can use Doctor Strange's Vapors of Valtor on him to make him invisible to the bad guys. And since enemies don't switch targets when this happens, it's an unmitigated critical
Tactical cheese.
You can also tell that the developers not only know their card games, but they also know their Marvel heroes. I like that every card is consistent with the character's lore, and it mirrors a skill that we have seen the character use before. Doctor Strange has Bolts of Balthak, Spell of Ashanti, and Agamotto's Gaze, amongst others. Logan has a couple of cards that make him regain health, like Rapid Healing and Rapid Regeneration, which you can even use after he's been knocked out. The Hulk, for example, uses a unique rage mechanic. The more he gets hit, the more damage his attacks do, and the more enemies who target him, the angrier he gets. Just like the actor who plays him in the MCU with the replies he gets on X. And I have to admit that I was as excited as a teenage girl at the concert of her favorite gayish K-pop star when I unlocked the Ghost Rider's unique legendary card, which is none other than the Pen and Stare, my favorite skill ever in the realm of superheroes. And when I used it for the first time,
he instantly ejaculated.
And the animation that goes with it,
he ejaculated into his pants.
The game has also most of the features you expect in a deck builder. You can combine 2 copies of the same card to create an upgraded version of it. You can mill or salvage cards to generate resources with which to purchase other upgrades. And you have what is probably my favorite feature in the game. You can add mods to each card, and you even have a choice of 2 mods per card. though I think it would have been more interesting tactically if the upgrades available hadn't been randomly generated. You can also craft cards that you already own if you want to be able to combine them into an upgraded version. You also have cards that work a little bit like consumables do in games like Tainted Grail Conquest. I think it's a little bit lacking in creativity that they are also cards, but the thing is that you do have consumables, and you can also craft them if you need to. There's also a Hydra intel room that allows you to send a hero on a personal mission to get an epic version of one of its cards. And if you are the kind of guy or gal who hates that in most card battlers you can't edit your deck however you wish and experiment with your cards, know that this isn't a limitation in Marvel Midnight Suns. You have to have a minimum of 8 cards, and there are some restrictions about the number of attack, skill, and heroic cards that you can have. But every card you earn becomes part of your permanent collection, and you can add it or remove it from your deck whenever you want. So as you can see, no, the deck building aspect of the game isn't shit per se. And if what I have described so far appeals to you,
I got news for you. That means you're gay.
But to me, Marvel Midnight Suns competes with card battlers, and that includes some pretty motherfucking good card battlers. And the best of them are designed in a way that challenges players in 3 different levels: operative, tactical, and strategic. This means that knowing how the game's basic mechanics work will be enough for a player to beat the first encounters in the game, maybe even the first boss if he or she is familiar with the genre. But in order to get past the second boss in these games consistently, players need to understand the game's tactical dimension. They need to think about card synergies and play efficiently. They need to consider the current battle, but also the battles to come. Because in the best card battlers, your character's health goes down as you take hits, and the opportunities to restore it are precious few, far in between, and they usually involve heavy opportunity costs. Like, shit, I need to heal. That means I won't be able to upgrade a card this time. But even tactical mastery can only get you so far. If you want to beat the Heart of the Spire or the Divine in the highest Covenant level, you need to understand your champion or faction or musicians on a strategic level. You must know the viable philosophies around which to build your deck, and you must choose those components, be them cards, relics, or other types of permanent passive boons, to build your deck around said philosophy. But in Marvel Midnight Suns, there isn't a strategic dimension. I guess if you were an ardent defender of the game, you could say,
yes, there is.
Each hero has 1 or 2 ways in which it can be played, and you can build your party of heroes with an overarching strategy in mind. You can make a party that outlives every challenge, you can build a glass cannon party, or you can go for a more balanced team. And depending on the type of party you build, you will have more or less trouble with this or that type of mission. But while this is true, the game focuses a heck of a lot more on the decisions you make during each round of an encounter than on the build aspect of the game. So as different as your heroes are, regardless of who you have in your party, you still have to prioritize your enemies with the same criteria, and there is still a more efficient way to use your environmental attacks. Take for example Beneath Oresa, a proper card battler that I absolutely recommend that you check out if you like the genre. In Beneath Oresa you have 9 champions, and they belong to 3 different factions. Each faction has its own mechanic. The Tainted ones, for example, use viruses, while the Guild of Ruinfarers use ammo. And these mechanics work in completely different ways. But then each individual member of the Guild of Ruinfarers, for example, has its own set of mechanics, which means that you will have to play these characters in a significantly different way to make the most out of the ammo. Take this card called No Quarter, for example. Each time you attack a foe for the first time, you gain 2 block, 5 if it's upgraded. You draw an attack card from your deck, and its cost is reduced by 1. So if all your attack cards cost 1, you get free attack cards every time you attack a foe you've not attacked this round yet. Usually it's better to focus fire to get rid of the most dangerous enemy first, but one way to play this character is to use attack cards to build defense. So this card is the bread and butter of your strategy right there. You need to make sure to find other cards that build defense or have some other positive cumulative effect for your character that triggers every time you use an attack. because your attacks cost 0 energy with this character if you use this build I'm telling you about. You also need to make sure to get this card every round or every other round. And because this build requires you to spread damage, you are going to have a lot of enemies attacking you compared to those champions and builds that are all about focusing fire. So this relic, the Crowd Dispersal Assistant, which gives you 50 block and 5 attack for every 2 bloodied enemies, is an absolute must for this build. You also have artifacts, which effectively work like power cards in other card battlers. These are cards that apply an effect or condition that persists throughout the encounter, but require you to spend energy points on something that won't have an immediate effect. But you don't have anything like this in Marvel Midnight Suns. There is no way to build a deck around a philosophy other than the straightforward role each hero is supposed to play in the party. And the only resource that you have, aside from the typical energy points that you use to play your cards, as you do in all card battlers, is heroism. You could make a build that focuses heavily on generating a lot of heroism and having some X cards where X is the amount of heroism you have, but this is about as strategic as the game's going to get. But Alex, I hear you say, you keep talking about Marvel Midnight Suns as though it were a card battler, and you keep comparing it with roguelike card battlers when this isn't that type of game. This game has tactical encounters with lots of variables, so it isn't the same. Well, my polite yet short of understanding strawman that I use to get my points across, let's talk about those tactical encounters with lots of variables, also known as the second turd, the tactical turn-based gameplay. Like we've said, Marvel Midnight Suns features tactical turn-based gameplay that some other reviewers have compared with Xcom. Missions take place in a single area within a single location. There are no building structures with multiple floors or corridors, so level design isn't a factor here as it is in those games. There are no vantage points or choke points for you to utilize. There are no situations in which you can employ ambush tactics with actions that trigger on the opponent's turn a la Overwatch, and only Wanda has a couple of interesting things that activate outside her turn. There are, however, a few interesting environmental hazards that you can use to your advantage and that enemies can also use against you. In fact, these environmental attacks constitute a very important part of the game, and you need to take them into account as part of your plan for every round. And I'm not gonna lie, they have interesting tactical value, and you can do some pretty kick-ass combos with them. Heroes like Magic and Spider-Man have cards that are specifically designed to be used in combination with these environmental hazards, and this, in my opinion, makes them unique compared to other heroes. In fact, this is what makes these heroes the most fun characters to play. Again, in my opinion. The best thing about these environmental hazards is that some of them allow you to gamble a little bit. You can push some enemies over the edge of a building or into summoning pits for an insta-kill, and the more health an enemy has, the more of a gamble it becomes, because the less likely it is for you to one-shot them by pushing them over these edges. But getting away with it also makes a huge difference in combat, but there are some serious issues with the tactical turn-based gameplay aspect of the game. First, the enemy variety is insufficient. It's not terrible, but you could have had more enemies. The way I see it, too much time elapses before each new type of enemy gets introduced, and even once all the bad guys have been added to the game, it still feels lacking because many of them have very similar attacks and mechanics. For like, what, the initial third of the game or so, you only get to fight against Venom and the generic trash Hydra mobs, of which there are only like 3 or 4 variants. You need to play for dozens of hours before you get to fight against new enemies, and even then, the enemies you get are the Soulless, which are energy zombies that do standard melee attacks only a bit harder than your average Hydra trash mob, some Barghest-like Hellhounds that also do standard melee attacks, green demons with shields, cultists that do range attacks and knock you back and have some sort of portable summoning circle, these Banshee-like enemies that link themselves to other bad guys and require you to take all of them down in the same round, and these mofos, which split into 2 every time they take damage and are also capable of duplicating enemies. These last 2 types of enemies are actually pretty cool and original, but they appear in the last third of the game or perhaps even later. And you may think, well, that's not too bad. You have a decent cast of bad guys that do a decent array of things, Yes, but the game is designed in a way that requires you to play a heck of a lot non-story missions that bloat the game unnecessarily and makes the enemy variety feel lacking. And let's even ignore how cheap it feels that regular Hydra soldiers, however enhanced they might be, are capable of surviving a combined attack of, say, Doctor Strange and the Ghost Rider. But that's a different story altogether. Bosses are another huge letdown for me. I straight out detest when bosses escape in the nick of time to fight another day. And in Marvel Midnight Suns, this happens with every fucking boss. No one ever gets defeated the first time you fight them. You fight each boss 3 times. As bosses, that is. Because after you defeat them for the first time, they are immediately demoted to glorified trash mobs, which means that they get thrown into regular missions as part of the cast of trash mobs that you have to do battle with. And this is just terrible, especially because at some point in the game, these bosses face you again, as bosses, and you're supposed to take them seriously. Fucking really? I whooped your ass twice already, Crossbones. What makes you think that I won't do it again? As for the missions, there are different types of challenges in the game, but they feel generic and crowbarred into the story. In Phoenix Point, you also had a bunch of cookie-cutter missions, but they were designed in a way that made them feel like it was something that you had to do in order to keep the virus at bay and prevent another city, another bastion of humanity from going radio silent. In Marvel Midnight Suns, there are only a handful of mission types, a handful of different scenarios, a handful of environmental hazards, and a handful of mission types. And this results in a game that feels too long and too repetitive. A game that outstays its welcome dozens of hours before the credits roll and has little to no replay value. You could rush through the game and ignore all non-mandatory missions, but it's easy for those characters you don't use as much to fall behind. And story-related missions will often require you to take 1 or even 2 specific heroes, so you want to keep everyone at their highest level at all times. So unless you don't mind leveling them up with the incredibly boring threat simulator, you have to do at least a few of those repetitive non-mandatory missions to maintain all your heroes more or less on the same level. Also, the game only becomes interesting in the hardest difficulty level, but you can't adjust the difficulty at the beginning of the game. The game will ask you if you want to unlock the next difficulty level every certain number of times you beat a mission and get a 3-star rating. So that means that if you want to enjoy the game's challenge to the fullest, you'll have to play at least some of the non-mandatory missions. Third turd, secondary mechanics. Marvel Midnight Suns has all the bells and whistles you expect in a card game. You can merge 2 copies of a card to create an upgraded version of it, you can mill or salvage cards for resources, you can add modifications, you can craft cards and upgrade facilities in your stronghold, which in turn allows you to upgrade your deck and heroes even further. But all of these features are painfully tedious to use, as all of them are wrapped in one form or another of cringe bullshit. Take for example Monster Train. Monster Train has all of the features we just talked about, and then some. And this is how the game's cycle works. You beat an encounter and you immediately get to choose your card reward and other cards if applicable. And immediately after you choose your reward, you are presented with this screen. A beautiful resting area that has all the features you need to upgrade your deck. A chef's kiss of user experience, design, and practicality. The road forks in 2 ways because, of course, every game worth its salt has some form of opportunity cost. So you choose a road depending on which features you need the most, you click on the facility you want to use, and you do what you need to do with 1 click. Whether it's buying a new card, combining 2 cards into a more powerful version of it, purchasing a relic, etc. And then off you go on to the next encounter, lean, practical, and with no extra bullshit. Love it. Here's how that same cycle works in Marvel Midnight Suns. You beat an encounter and you don't get a card reward. You go back to your stronghold and then you walk around the fortress to see if any of your companions wants to chat, because chatting is necessary in this game. And you look for your dog because you need to pet her every day, because it's necessary to get some goodies. But the facilities that do what these facilities do in Monster Train only work during the day in Marvel Midnight Suns, because they are managed by your companions. and your companions are chillaxing at night, you know? Watching their cell phones, drinking root beer, and reading books by the fire. Okay, so you go to sleep, you get 1 or 2 cutscenes that you've seen a million times before, although you can skip them, and then you wake up and walk, not run, walk, because there is a press shift to run function, but it's not available inside your fortress, where you spent 90% of the time. It is, however, available outside the Abbey's grounds, where you spent like 10% of your time, but that's neither here nor there. So you go to the forge if no one interrupts you.
¿Qué pasa, Hunter?
¿Pasa de qué, imbécil? Once there, you have to click on this anvil that brings up this menu in which you have to choose the coil option, because no, just getting cards would be too straightforward. The devs had to make this mechanic a part of the story, so they invented some cheap, convoluted shit about coils that require research or some such bullshit that no one gives a shit about. You watch Tony Stark do his little animation for the 100th time and listen to one of 3 or 4 mega cringe little greetings that only the Sumerest of Sumers would find cool, and then
you have my permission to die.
Only then, you get to choose your card reward. And this is how you get your card reward in Marvel Midnight Suns. This is how you get a card reward in Slay the Spire, Monster Train, Power Chord, and I rest my case. Then, if you want to combine your cards, you need to walk over to the yard area, click on this sword, listen to Blade say something cheesy and repetitive, and choose the appropriate option. And if this doesn't seem too annoying or unnecessarily time-consuming, try doing it 50 or 60 times. Oh, and by the way, if you don't have enough resources to pay for the cost of the upgrade, but you have plenty of cards lying about that you're willing to salvage to turn into resources, you need to exit this interface, open your inventory, salvage the card, and then go back to the upgrade menu. Fuck off, game. Each hero has a wait for it, dairy card. These legendary cards are straight out OP assets that can even break the game if you use them cleverly. And to earn these cards, you have to survive the hardest challenge in the game, which is listening to each hero's cringe bullshit conversations to increase their friendship. If you have the stomach to endure Nico Minoru's cringe Sumer bullshit, or Magic's catalog of spoiled Karen dialogue lines, or Blade, a 100-year-old vampire, talk about some plan he's hatching to hit on Captain Marvel, then you might get a high enough level of approval with these characters or become the F-word, as Magic calls it. When you become friends with a hero, you gain access to his or her own unique challenge. And this is one of the most interesting things about the game. These challenges are puzzles, not unlike the Gwent puzzles that you have in Thronebreaker, and this adds a nice touch of variety to the gameplay mix, but in my opinion, they are wildly inconsistent in terms of their difficulty. Some of these puzzles, like Spider-Man's, Ghost Rider's, Hulk's, or Doctor Strange's, are almost non-challenges, while some others may sit you on your ass for a few minutes. There are also clubs in this game, and they are the pinnacle of cringe. These are little groups led by different members of the Midnight Suns. And to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here, let me tell you this. Blade organized the reading club with the sole purpose of inviting Captain Marvel so that he could hit on her. These clubs amount to completely useless interactions with your companions. They do not advance the story, they do not serve to tell you more about the setting in which the story takes place or the state of the world. They don't even tell you anything you don't already know about the characters. They are slice of life moments that no one fucking asked for. Or at least I didn't. But like many other story-driven bullshit things in this game, there are cards dangling at the end of these interactions like a juicy carrot on a stick. So because you want to have the most powerful deck possible, you hold your breath and you dive headfirst into this cesspool. I usually give extra points to games that don't have romanceable characters. Romance is usually unrealistic, out of place, and cringe. And in the hands of the wrong writers, it can easily become an unmitigated cringe-hameha. And Marvel Midnight Suns writers eat cringios for
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
So they very much sit at the top of the list of wrong writers. But in this game, at least a little romance would have given me something to look forward to. I mean, if I have to suffer through this puke-inducing display of sumeristic dialogue, at least let me get hot and steamy with Wanda.
Here, I was thinking you and Wanda were gonna be a thing.
Yeah, I thought so too, Nico, but I think I didn't play my cards right. Let me tell you how it happened.
We can begin.
Oh, Wanda.
That was fast. I never want to do that again.
Third turd, story and lore. Marvel Midnight Sun's story. And you know me, guys, I'm a story and lore guy through and through. I don't particularly like walking simulators, but I played What Remains of Edith Finch all the way through because it told a compelling story rife with food for thought. I have wholeheartedly recommended you Tainted Grail Conquest several times here on the channel, and I even went as far as to say that it is one of the best games of the decade, despite the fact that it is not a great card battler. Hell, I'll even tell you that Inscription is one of those precious rare games that you have to play before you die because it has an amazing story and it plays every trick in the book and even invents a few of its own to turn the very concept of storytelling on its ear. And there are several other games like Shadowrun Hong Kong and Expeditions Rome that I find exciting because the writing elevates every other aspect of the game. But the story in Marvel Midnight Suns does the exact opposite thing. It makes every other aspect of the game worse. It wrecks a game that had the potential to be a decent Marvel-themed tactical turn-based game with card battler combat mechanics. See, Phoenix Point is also a tactical turn-based game, and it has a much more complex and nuanced story, one in which the stakes feel much higher. And more importantly, you have some agency over the final outcome, and it achieves this with a 20th of the dialogue that you have in Marvel Midnight Suns. The story in Phoenix Point progresses every time you complete one of the game's main missions, and all throughout the game you are required to make decisions that have an impact on the story. And though it's usually a binary choice, you're still gonna be sweating bullets with each decision, because while the concept of what is right and just is unequivocal in this game, the actors that you have to cooperate with to avert the threat dwell in a space where there's shades of grey, and that often forces you to choose the lesser evil. And even non-mandatory missions have little story bits and interactions that serve to tell you more about the state of the world or the factions that have conflicting visions, but the story never gets in the way of the gameplay. You want to customize your soldiers, craft items, upgrade your stronghold, or fiddle around with your vehicles? Just click where you need to click and do the damn thing. And truth is, you don't even need a good story in a tactical turn-based game Xcom style or in a card battler. Monster Train, for example, has a ridiculous premise. Your goal is to get a train called the Bone Shaker through the 9 hells and fend off the angelic goody-doers that seek to stop it. Why is it so important that the train reaches its destination?
Doesn't matter.
Who are these demonic forces at your command?
Doesn't matter.
What happens when you reach the end of the line?
Doesn't matter.
In Power Chord, you are a heavy metal band trying to close a portal to the gates of hell, from which demons and devils who also rock hard are jumping into this world. And I couldn't tell you what the story in Slay the Spire is if my life depended on it. Where in hell are we in this game?
I don't know.
Why are we here to begin with?
I don't know.
Where do these characters come from?
I don't know.
The game is purposefully vague about all of this, as if it were telling you, just play the damn thing and stop asking stupid questions. So you have no choice but to say,
well, alright.
And play the damn thing and stop asking stupid questions. But Firaxis was all hell bent on making this game about its story. And they did it in the worst possible way. They shoved it right between your
waxed platinum butt cheeks,
and they wouldn't let you just play the damn thing. It's like they knew their story was shit, so they gated everything you cared about in the game, which is namely cards, behind endless pointless conversations about completely irrelevant shit. If you don't play any non-mandatory missions, this game is reduced to a lame-ass interactive film in which the heroes do battle against the bad guys when they have nothing better to do. And the better things they have to do include having drinks, lounging in the pool with barely tolerable Sumer Emo Kid number 1, gazing at the stars with unsufferable Sumer Emo Kid number 2.
You know, typical kid stuff.
Yeah, fuck off. or playing video games with the Ghost Rider. And you can't simply ditch the whole cringe bullshit, because you can only get the best cards if you reach a high enough level of friendship, and the collective friendship of the team also makes your party more powerful. And on top of that, you can't even have a little fun on the side with Wanda. Hey Wanda, are you busy? Wanna get busy together, like in my room?
No.
The more I've flagellated myself rewatching my footage of the game for this video, the more I've felt like the story was created by ticking boxes on a checklist of specific objectives rather than by following a creative process. And it ended up being like Homer Simpson's idea of a family car, an abomination designed to meet a list of nonsensical demands made by someone who had no idea what he was doing in the first place. The first box was probably, it needs to be a story about the Midnight Suns. And fair enough, that one makes sense. And despite everything, I think they could have told a decent story about the Midnight Sun. But another box seems to have been, it needs to be a successful AAA game that we can sell for $60 and that everyone would be interested in playing. And here is where it starts to get complicated, because you're surely not going to achieve that with Nico Minoru and Colossus's younger sister as your game's main characters. You need to bring in the cavalry for that. You need Spider-Man, the Hulk, Iron Man, and all the other guys. But now you have a story that's burdened with a colossal task of giving each hero his or her own 15 minutes of glory. And see, having 12 heroes along the lines of Spider-Man and the Hulk at your disposal sounds like an awesome thing to have in a game. I mean, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had 50 heroes. And I don't think anyone would have minded if it had had 10 more. But Marvel Midnight Suns is a story-driven game, and it feels like a table that has 12 legs when it only really needed 4. So now you have to resort to all manners of bullshit MacGuffins to give all the characters something to do. In Phoenix Point, you can potentially have a lot more than just 12 characters, but the story is kept lean and to the point because your characters are always referred to as a collective entity known as Phoenix Point. But you can't do that with Captain America and Wolverine, can you? If you have these guys in a story-driven game, they'd better have an important part to play. But then there was another box that they had to tick. The Midnight Suns have to be the protagonists. The A-listers cannot steal the spotlight from them. And this is probably the one they fucked up the worst. You had the Avengers and the Midnight Suns, an old guard of seasoned heroes on one hand, and a group of talented but inexperienced youngsters on the other. Two groups that definitely didn't see eye to eye, but still needed to cooperate with each other to avert a world-ending threat. And this was the perfect opportunity to tell a story about two different groups that have nothing but contempt and distrust for each other initially, but who are eventually left with no choice but to rely upon their resentful allies until they ultimately come to respect and even admire each other to the point in which they put their differences behind them and defeat the ultimate evil. And I am sure the writers think that that was the story they were telling, but it wasn't. Over the course of the game, the classic heroes that we have all grown to love and respect throughout the decades get consistently mocked, belittled, and humiliated. There are dozens of scenes that show the youngsters proving the old heroes wrong, or getting better results than them, or straight out showing them how it's done. But there are exactly 0 scenes of the opposite. It feels like a story told by people with a chip on their shoulder. Take for example one of the initial passages of the game. Doctor Strange begins to resurrect the player's MC, but his magic powers prove insufficient, so Nico needs to step in and show him how it's done. And not long after that, Strange needs to go to Manhattan to save the Sanctum Sanctorum, and he's presented as incompetent and ignorant. He blabbers incessantly about what it takes to summon a portal, and about why he's incapable of doing it in that moment, and after quietly listening to Strange's pathetic explanation, Magic simply steps forward and summons a portal to further sink him in ridicule.
Any more questions?
Never mind that he's the Sorcerer Supreme. The game has no problem shitting on that constantly, because of course they need to diminish this character to elevate every other magic user in the story.
I will simply alert Wanda to prepare the necessary rituals.
What? Straight to voicemail?
Some Sorcerer Supreme.
And after that, the game makes sure that Doctor Strange is consistently presented as petty and selfish. He's always worrying more about getting the Sanctum Sanctorum back than about rescuing Wanda. So when Nico and Magic conceive a plan to rescue Wanda, they have the perfect excuse to keep him out of a plan. And when Wanda comes back, he doesn't even seem to give two shits about it. And not a single time during the entire story is he ever validated as a great wizard, let alone a sorcerer supreme. If anything, the game consistently presents him as the weakest magic user of the lot. At least he's pretty powerful as a character gameplay-wise. Oh, you like the Hulk, because he's a classic timeless character that has been around since 1962, and all the way through he's been portrayed as one of the most powerful characters in Marvel? Well, it's time to burst your bubble, bigot.
Showtime. When the answer is right in front of you, the most powerful creature on Earth isn't on Mount Wondergore. She's the witch of Wondergore.
Oh, of course.
And it's time she went home.
Impossible.
Wanda, the priority is to stop the Hulk. You know what has 42 teeth and can hold the Incredible Hulk? My zipper, Wanda. Oh, I hear you like Johnny Blaze, the original Ghost Rider? Well, this is what the new guys think of him.
Oh my god, Robbie, why are you so pumped about meeting Blaze? Word on the street is the dude's a major a-hole.
Almost as lame as Hank Pym being your hero.
Who's that?
An annoying, outdated boomer. Just like your boy Blaze.
Oh yes, and let's shit on Hank Pym just in case you like him too. And while it's not as bad as some other AAA games out there when it comes to virtue signaling, Marvel Midnight Suns has its share of passages like this conversation you have with Captain America.
I just find another cause to fight for that didn't require the use of my fists or my shield. Like? I don't know. Probably some social justice nonprofits or something to do with stopping climate change.
Fucking really? Social justice and climate change? See, they could have had him say something consistent with the character, you know? Something self-righteous and cheesy along the lines of, well, the Avengers were created to fight the battles that others never could. So that's what I am going to do, with or without my shield. But no, they had to make a statement in the name of their tribe. Social justice and climate change. But worse than any of that is the baffling validation of narcissistic behavior and entitlement in this game. Take this passage, for example, in which the heroes organize a birthday party for Magic.
What?
Are you alright?
I have endured enough of this. This has gone on long enough. You made me the center of attention I do not need at a party I did not want. So what do you want now? To cut the cake?
Magic, wait.
Fine. I will cut the cake.
Happy birthday? So is this a normal thing with her, or...
Mr. Stark.
Ileana's my friend. How could I have missed this?
Stop it right there. This is all sorts of wrong. So Nico is the one who feels she has to apologize, not the spoiled asshole who destroyed the cake that they made for her and fucked off into limbo? No, it's those who carefully planned the party and put their time and effort into celebrating her birthday who should apologize for not knowing about her painful birthday childhood memories. So I followed Magic into limbo, not because I gave a shit about this piece of shit character, but because I wanted to see if at some point down the road, I was gonna be given the chance to say something like, hey bitch, you have to go back and apologize to all these people for being an asshole, especially to Nico. Or failing that maybe she would realize that she had acted badly and apologize to everyone out of her own initiative. But nope, you're not given the option to confront her about it, and she never apologizes to anyone. Worse yet, you are only given options to show empathy and understanding. So the game finds this perfectly acceptable then. As if what is expected by default is for everyone to feel bad and apologize to her, for doing something that she found offensive, even though it was never anyone's intention to offend her in any way. When you go to Limbo to look for magic, you find out that something traumatic happened to her on one of her birthdays, and that's why she doesn't like to remember it, and you are expected to take that as justification for her behavior. The game is basically saying it's totally justified that she destroyed the cake and fucked off into Limbo because she has these memories, you see, and this whole celebration brought them back. Are you fucking shitting me? Time and time again, other characters talk about how harsh and difficult Magic's childhood was, and about how strong it made her. They want to sell you that this character is stoic and independent, but what we are shown is a narcissistic, spoiled Karen who acts like an asshole in her birthday, destroys the birthday cake that others have gotten for her, and fucks off into Limbo despite the fact that all these guys were clearly trying to be nice to her and that none of them even knew about the birthday trauma.
You know, typical kid stuff.
Fuck off, Nico. Speaking of Nico, I also find it hilarious that magic is super duper important in the story because she's the only one who can open portals. But the minute the plot needs it, in rides Nico with her magical bullshit staff, throws in some bullshit explanation to justify why she hadn't been able to open portals before, but is perfectly capable of doing it now, and opens up a portal so that you can follow Magic into Limbo to see if she's okay after she pulverized her birthday cake with her sword. Fucking really? And I can't end this section before I talk about the worst sin Marvel Midnight Suns commits in the narrative department. This game uses the cheapest and cringiest trope there is in modern day writing, the most blatant indication that a story was written by someone with a chip on his or her shoulder. I am talking about the female villain turned heroine who saves the day. A villain who is redeemed in the end and whose evil deeds are forgiven because she was wronged in the past or coerced or manipulated into doing all the evil things she did. So of course, in the end, she rights all her wrongs by becoming the true hero of the story. And she does so by making the ultimate sacrifice or by performing the one heroic action that is beyond even the protagonist's power, because no one is as awesome as she is. So when I saw that the game was consistently elevating Lilith, Sarah, and Agatha above everyone else in the story, when I saw that Caretaker was consistently presented as the ultimate badass who called all the shots, the heightened figure of authority for Midnight Suns and Avengers alike, someone who obviously had untold magical powers far beyond those of even the Sorcerer Supreme himself, when I saw that breaking Wanda free from Lilith's influence was shaping up to be the most important thing in the game, I already knew exactly how the game was going to end, and I wasn't wrong. I knew Lilith was going to be Kalar Argent all over again. And when I say Kalar Argent, I say Nyrissa.
You made me your puppet, but I have won my freedom. You stole the essence of my soul, but now it is returned. You cursed me, but I do not accept this curse. I reject the path you cut for me. I will not be what you would make me. I fear no punishment. I will not bow, and I will not turn back. I do not seek your forgiveness.
Modern day Evelyn.
You were always going on and on about He-Man.
You used to go on and on about Skeletor.
What a fool I was. My devotion to Skeletor blinded me to the obvious. That I could have been a master of the universe. I was born to rule. But instead of fulfilling my destiny, I spent a lifetime helping him fulfill his.
Riva, or that half-assed dragon from Damsel. This right here is the pinnacle of modern day bad writing. And in Marvel Midnight Suns' case in particular, the script makes sure that Lilith thoroughly steals the protagonism from the main character. You know, just in case the player decides to play a male character. But the villain turned heroine is hardly the only post-2016 trope this game throws at you. Writers everywhere, it's been 8 years of this shit, giving us characters with villainous personality traits like pathological narcissism and expecting us to see them as good people and sometimes even as the heroes of the story.
You need to stop that.
Token diverse character who has the exact same powers as an original character to fill a quota.
You need to stop that.
the ridiculously powerful female whose character arc consists in coming to terms with how powerful she is so that she can stop being afraid of her own power. I get it, Wanda, you're so powerful that you're afraid of your own power. Now, can we fuck?
No.
But of course, they didn't let me fuck with Wanda. We're talking about a game in which there is a bar where there's only root beer, the F word is friends, and you don't see a drop of blood when blood magic spells are cast. So I had to fap to Wanda off screen. But it was an angry fap because I couldn't help but think like this was another middle finger that the game was giving me. And these, my friends, are the biggest turds in the stool. But to make no mistake about it, I'm not done shitting on them. I just think it's fair to take a break from the shitnado to talk about the game's presentation. What can I say about this? It's a modern day AAA title and production values are top notch. For someone who spends most of his time far behind the wall dwelling in the indie world, production values like the ones you find in Marvel Midnight Suns are simply amazing. The character models of the heroes are all on point, and the eye-popping animations are all a joy to watch. From Iron Man's air superiority attack that takes you back to the mini-missile scene in the Avengers, to the over-the-top badassery of the Ghost Rider imposter running everyone over with his Hell Ride, they are all truly amazing, and I think this is the best tribute these characters could have asked for in modern times. The standouts have to be Wolverine and the Spider-Man. The animation of Wolverine's Berserker and Eviscerate skills genuinely got a "shit that's cool" out of me. And Nico Minoru speaks for all of us when she says,
It's always fun watching you do your thing.
and one of the frames for this animation is the trademark image for the
amazing
Spider-Man. It's all like visiting Disney World for the first time when you are 9 or 10 years old. Just the sound mix and the subtle slow-mo effect that you get when you shoulder charge a trash mob onto another trash mob to take them both out with a double knockout, pack enough dopamine to carry you all the way to the end credits. Damn, this thing never gets old. Some of the heroes look weird and cheap without their suits. Wanda looks like she skips leg day when she's sitting at the pool, though I would still bite that ham. And some of the facial animations are a little crude, but these are just minor nitpicks. The Abbey grounds and the Abbey itself is so cool and elaborate that it almost seems like a waste that it was used for a game that would have been much better without it, or without any of the things that take place there. The musical score is sparse, and the pieces themselves are a bit on the generic side. The track for the final confrontation, however, took me by surprise. I really wasn't expecting blast beats and double bass drums, and I'm not complaining at all. The voice acting is a who's who of stellar voices, but the lines are so cringe that not even Matt Mercer and Laura Bailey can save this one. Matt Mercer, a guy who is capable of playing two completely different characters in the same game, one of which is possessed by yet another character who isn't even the same sex. A guy who is capable of grabbing one of the most iconic characters in the history of video games and giving it its own spin while still making it come off as faithful to the original in a game that is otherwise anything but. A guy who, like I've said before here on the channel, could play fucking Barbie and would still be the guy for the job. That guy sounded like he had no idea what he was supposed to sound like in this game. Sometimes he sounds like Aloth, and sometimes like Adair.
Confess your feelings prematurely? I know it was not ideal, but the heart wants what it wants.
You know I can turn you into a frog, right?
So you can restore me with a kiss?
Half of the time, it felt like he didn't know what was happening, and the rest of the time, he sounded like he couldn't care less. But as bad as this sound, he's still Marlon freaking Brando compared to the female hunter. Short story is that everyone sucks in this game, except for perhaps the Wolverine and Nico. And I am going to blame the voice director here, because the cast are top tier professionals. But yeah, apart from the voice acting, the game's presentation is fantastic. Performance and stability. I really had to go through some convoluted shit to even get this game to work. Turns out the 2K launcher fucked everything up. And even after I got it to work, I had to fuck around with every graphical setting, including forcing the game to use DirectX 11, but I imagine that's because I am using Windows 10 Enterprise and my graphic card is a bit on the old side. I guess this is useful information if by some miracle you're still interested in this game, but you have a personal potato instead of a proper gaming rig. Other considerations and final thoughts. I am well aware that this game isn't for me, but to leave it at that would be a monumental understatement. Marvel Midnight Suns is almost a complete checklist of all the things that I detest in the AAA gaming space. And you could very well say, well, then don't fucking play the game. Moreover, don't fucking play any AAA titles and be done with it. After all, it's just entertainment and you are free to choose any game you want. And it's not like the indie market isn't chock-a-block with options for people like you. Yes, this predicament could easily be fixed by asking for a refund and playing Beneath Oresa and Phoenix Point instead. Case closed, right? Maybe. Maybe you are right. But Marvel Midnight Suns leaves an especially bad taste in my mouth that goes beyond a mild disappointment that I can rant away on one of my 5-in-1 videos. Remember Lost Eidolons? That's probably the worst game I've played and reviewed for the channel, but it didn't leave me with a feeling that there was something wrong with the world. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth that this is a game about the Midnight Suns that brings in characters like Doctor Strange and Iron Man only to make them look incompetent and petty, because that's how the writers chose to make their own dogs in the race look better. I can almost hear them say, "Look at what we do with your precious heroes, and there's not a thing you can do about it because now we hold the power." It feels like an exercise of retribution by someone with a chip on his shoulders. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth that a character in the game straight out destroys a symbol of caring and affection made by people whose intention was good, and that not only is the player never even given the chance to say anything about it, but also the only person who comments about it suggests that it is her own fault for not knowing better. It's as though the game is making the statement that trying your best to adapt to the people around you is not the way to go, that the way you feel about other people's actions is what matters the most, and that everyone else should adapt to you. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth that the game has so many safety nets. I understand that you cannot make a AAA title and then gatekeep everyone who isn't a card battler freak, because that would lead to catastrophic financial failure. But Marvel Midnight Suns just goes in the opposite direction, to the extreme. It's as though it's terrified to tell the player, you failed because you didn't do what needed to be done, try again, from scratch. And I think this particular trend is not exclusive to video games. If anything, I think it's a global vision that has trickled into video games from the world at large. It reminds me of some modern day policies that we have these days in schools and even some universities that state that students can't fail a subject, that they should be allowed to repeat an exam endlessly until they get a passing score, which inevitably results in the teacher eventually getting tired and just lowering the standard until the student passes. Because what you didn't learn in an entire semester, you are most definitely not going to learn in a week. This is an overall vision that is all hell-bent on lowering the threshold of success so that no one ever has to experience failure and frustration. And this is the wrong road that leads to the wrong tendencies. Dealing with failure and frustration and accepting that not everything is achievable is necessary, and removing the scenario of failure altogether is a bad plan. And even in a context as irrelevant as video games, this approach to game design makes your achievements and victories as a player feel cheap. And cheap is how this game feels despite its fancy production values and the monumental amount of work that's been put into its design and development. And the fact that this game is so popular worries me, because I am going to go back to my place behind the wall, not only with a new lesson in never again, a new traumatic experience, a new brick for the wall, but with the feeling that the world is a little bit worse today than it was yesterday. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what you are seeing on this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Come check us out on Discord if you don't mind all the boomer talk that goes on there. I personally love it and wouldn't change it for anything. And share the video if you thought it was cool.
You're excused. You can go back to playing video games.